Are you ready to purchase your first home here in Australia? In today's video, we're going to break down all the steps required to purchase your very first property and get the keys to your first home. My name's Luke and I talk about all things property, investing and renovations. Make sure you stick around to the end of this video where I give my biggest tip on how you can make the most out of buying your first home. So let's break down the process of buying your first home. Step number one is getting the pre-approval. This can be either through a mortgage broker or a bank. Now, mortgage brokers are really dominating the market when it comes to getting loans these days. There are pros and cons to using either a mortgage broker or a big financial institution like a bank. Now, when you're using a mortgage broker, it's important to find someone that you gel with, that understands your needs and what's going to suit you in terms of a loan structure. Now, ask them as many questions as you can. I've actually got a video on the 10 questions that you should be asking your mortgage broker, so check that out in the description down below. But essentially, you just need to ask the mortgage broker what your lending capacity is, so you have a good understanding of what you can afford and what you can go out there and search for and make offers on in the market. Note that using a mortgage broker, the lead times may be a little bit slower as the banks tend to prioritize their internal broking services over external brokers. So if you're dealing with a bank, the key thing here is to make sure you're getting a competitive market rate. But all in all, don't be too worried about whether you use a mortgage broker or a bank directly for your first property, as long as you understand that if you're buying it for yourself, it's likely to be on principal and interest. And if you're buying it for investment, maybe you should look at using interest only to maximize your cash flow to begin with. So that's step one. Go to the broker or the bank and understand your lending capacity. Once you know how much you can borrow, the search begins. You can either employ a buyer's agent to help you find property in an area that you're interested in, or you could go out there and do it yourself and take on the real estate agents in negotiating deals. So when you're searching for a market, it's important to narrow yourself down to less and less suburbs, preferably less than 10 suburbs, or ideally less than 5. If you can find your 5 key suburbs that you're really interested in, you've got to go out there and do a lot of research. The key thing to understand is recent comparable sales, or it's also called CMA, comparable market analysis. All this means in fancy terms that the agents use is that there are properties that have recently sold out there for a certain value, so you need to understand what other properties have sold for and compare them to new properties that are going for sale in the market. Just to use an example, if there was a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom property that sold in a suburb you're looking at, now you need to understand what the sale price of that property was and then compare it to a new property that's just listed to try and gauge the value of the new property. The key thing here is to understand what years they were built, whether they have similar floor plans, whether they have similar bedrooms, bathrooms, locations. There's a lot of factors that go into understanding a property. So do your due diligence and research and understand comparable sales to work out what new properties are likely to be worth. Step number 3 is once you've found a property that meets your criteria, it's to go out there and make offers. Now you can make a bunch of lowball offers on a whole heap of properties and eventually you'll find a needle in a haystack, but you're going to cheese a lot of people off in the process by throwing out lowball offers with no point of reference and not a lot of contact through the negotiating process. A much more refined strategy would to be meeting agents at open homes and making a strong first offer or after the initial open home's been held. Now, you obviously don't want to overpay for a property, but in a heated market, you need to be making strong offers with good finance and good building and pest clause terms to make yourself competitive against other buyers. Now, the 2 most common scenarios are private treaty and auctions. In a private treaty scenario, a property will typically be held as an open home, and in a heated market that we're in right now, offers need to be made within a day or 2 of the open home occurring. If you can even get in and ask the agent to see the property before the open home is held, that's a great way of seeing the property and making an early offer. The key here is to try and get your offers in ahead of other buyers and to get the agents and the vendor's attention to your offer and to get an agreement on price and get that contract signed by both parties. In an auction scenario, there can be a couple of variations like blind auctions where they ask for a bunch of offers from all of the potential buyers and they'll pick the highest offer. Or there can be the open auctions, which you see on the weekends, where they hold the open home and then the auction and the highest bidder essentially wins as long as they're above reserve. In these scenarios, when you've got an auction situation, set your top price, understand what your limit is, and do not bid any higher on the auction day. Emotions tend to boil over during an auction scenario as people get heated and they want to outbid the competition and they feel like they're going to miss out on this property and miss out on the deal. So make sure you set your limit before you go into an auction situation and stick to it. Number 4 is getting your offer accepted. Now this is an exciting time. So you've been negotiating back and forth or you've won your auction. Now it's time to sign the contracts and get your offer accepted. Here's where you really need to be organized and on top of all the paperwork that's coming in. You need to make sure that you have executed contracts which have been reviewed by the lawyers and that you've paid your initial deposit for the property. Also, make sure that you get the necessary insurances in place straight away because you are liable, especially here in Queensland. I'm not going to speak for other states, but you are liable from day one when you sign the contract to ensure you have insurance. You also need to be managing your building and pest inspections and your finance clauses, so make sure you're liaising with your broker or your bank and with a trusted building inspector to ensure those occur well before the deadlines within your contract. You want to ensure the building and pest inspector can get in there as soon as possible to give you a finalized report if you haven't got one already, and you want to be liaising with your bank or your broker to ensure that finance is going to get across the line smoothly. Now this one, number 5, is that building and pest inspection report coming back to you before your clause is up. It's important to thoroughly read through your building and pest inspection report and even have an extended chat if you can with the building and pest inspector. Emily and I in the past have gone out to the property while the inspector was there, but make sure you ask them ahead of time that they're comfortable with that, and they'll usually tell you a bit more if you're there on site with them and you get to have a conversation and a chat with them because they are builders or ex-builders and they're going to give you more information if you have a conversation with them to help you understand any issues with the property or any pest or termite access that there might be that need to be resolved. Now there are 3 kind of roads the building and pest inspection report can take. Number 1 is that the property is in great condition and really doesn't have any issues. In this situation, you can negotiate on minor defects for $1,000 or a few $1,000s to try and reduce the price, but you're unlikely to ask for this because the property's in great condition and really the building and pest inspector didn't find any major issues or issues that need rectifying in the property. Avenue number 2 is where they find some issues that are going to be of a significant cost, and this is where you can really negotiate with a vendor. Now, it's important to negotiate before your building and pest clause is up, and you kind of need to threaten that you're going to terminate the contract unless they reduce the sale price by your asking limit. Now, the way Emily and I did this for our first few property purchases was to call the agent on the day our building and pest inspector was out on the property and before the clause was up. And we had a discussion with the agent explaining that there were a number of issues that the building and pest inspector had found and that these would potentially cost anywhere between $10,000 to $15,000. But given our consideration, we agreed that we would ask for a discount of $5,000 off the property to cover these expenses and we would deal with the rest after settlement. We managed to negotiate $5,000 off the purchase price, and this was a great way for us to save money, put more money in our pocket and push towards these fixes. Now, avenue number 3 is where the building and pest inspector finds something major that's going to cause an issue, and it really is a deal breaker. You will get your money back, so you will get your initial deposits back. If you find something that's a major issue with a property, you can pull out of the contract as long as you have a building and pest inspector clause in the contract. It's obviously an upsetting time if you find a house is ridden with termites or it's got structural issues that you're not willing to take on and you think it's going to be too costly, but it's important to understand that there will always be another fish in the sea. There'll always be another property out there. So take a look on the bright side that you found it before the clause had gone up, and so pull out of the contract using your building and pest inspector's report to do that. You go to your lawyer and ask them to lodge it and cancel the contract, and that can all get processed. So you finally made it to settlement day. Now, up towards the closing of your contract and your settlement, make sure you're liaising again with your bank and with the real estate agent / vendor to make sure that everything's in place for settlement. What will occur is your lawyers and their lawyers will meet to exchange and ensure that the final funds are transferred from your financial institution to the seller. It's a very exciting day once a house finally settles and you can get access to your property. It's important to ensure that all things are up to date, ensuring the documentation is ready to go, and that you're regularly communicating with your lawyers to ensure the transition occurs smoothly across the settlement date. Finally, you've reached step number 7, which is moving in. Now, this is an exciting period of time. You've gone through all the steps, you've negotiated the deal, you've closed the deal, you've reached settlement, and now it's time to celebrate. So that means, having a house party, having a street party, allowing your friends and family to see your new place and share the joy of owning your own property. For others, it might mean getting stuck straight into renovations if that's what you're wanting to do, and getting stuck into DIY. Or if you're not into that, maybe you're just kicking back and relaxing and enjoying a new home. Now, my big tip to ensure everything runs smoothly in purchasing your first home is to go through all the documentation you receive with a fine-tooth comb. That means understanding all of the numbers and the intricacies of the documentation to ensure everything is A-OK and in your favor. Emily and I have had an interesting experience with some of the contracts and some of the calculations on settlement statements. If I hadn't recalculated the numbers that were done on one of our deals once we'd asked for a discount, our lawyers would have actually given $5,000 to another party. If it wasn't for me reviewing the contracts and the settlement statements carefully and recalculating the numbers, then you could have gypped thousands of dollars. And it's important to know that you're going to be working in your own best interest in this situation, so take the time to understand the documents and the numbers in your deal. If you're not confident in working in the numbers and understanding all of the documentation required, make sure you reach out to someone that's bought a property before or a trusted advisor that you can use to review all this documentation with you. It's critical to processing and buying a property to get the documentation right, so don't forget this step when you're purchasing your first home. Now, that was the end-to-end process of purchasing your very first home. Review these steps again if you need to. If you've got any questions or comments about buying your first home, leave a comment down below. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you and start a conversation and build a community here on the channel. Drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. Can't wait to see you in the next video. Peace.